Hi everyone, my name is Janaya Shorty and I will be discussing reasons why sweatshops still exist. So the word sweatshop already has a negative connotation. A sweatshop is simply a factory or workshop, especially in the clothing industry, where workers are employed at very low wages. The work hours are unreasonably long and they tend to work under very poor conditions. Sweatshops typically violate majority of our labor laws today. In developing countries, an estimated 168 million children ranging from ages 5 to 14 are forced to work. America has stronger labor laws than most underdeveloped and third world countries, but unfortunately, it is not free of sweatshop conditions. The information obtained from this presentation is from our required text, Technology, Social Media, and Society, edited by Caroline Schaefer, and I will be discussing Chapter 7.3, Reasons Why Sweatshops Still Persist, written by Jolene Ong. After this presentation, you will understand relationships between factories and suppliers. You will be able to describe what a supply chain is and where ethical issues emerge, and you will also be able to list several reasons why sweatshops still exist. Sweatshops exist everywhere, not just in China or in underdeveloped countries. There are sweatshops here in Orange County and LA County. Sweatshops tend to be prevalent in areas where there are migrant and stateless workers, as labor laws do not usually protect them. These workers are often undocumented and lack basic education, giving them few choices for work. For example, there is forced labor in Florida's tomato fields and also child labor in Malaysia's palm oil industry company. This just goes to show how common sweatshops are across the world, not just in China, not just in underdeveloped countries, and not just in the United States. As you can well imagine, most brands do not own their own factories. Almost every large retailer is vertically disintegrated. Vertical disintegration is a process in which distributing products or services using raw materials are controlled by one business, company, or institution. It is extremely unusual for the general public and mainstream media to know the name of a supplier factory. Vertical disintegrated businesses decrease the liability for companies if something goes wrong. For example, a customer wouldn't return a shoe to the factory where it was produced. They would return it from the retail store they purchased it from. This is why a retailer's responsibility for their transactional relations is still going to be questioned by the public and media, as their brand reputation is linked to their social responsibility. Another reason why sweatshops still exist is because many suppliers have unstable relationships with their retail workers. Many companies might have policies for issues such as forced and child labor, and they may also have an ethical code of conduct. Unfortunately, suppliers have a small voice and very little decision-making power than its retail customer. As a result, suppliers are faced with short-term contracts and inadequate time beforehand to produce goods. If factories don't have a secure, long-standing customer relationship, this puts them at risk because they may need to front their own money and will be fighting to make sure every purchase order happens. This can lead to an excessive amount of overtime, which can trigger an increase in accidents that occur in the workplace, putting both the worker and the company at risk. Next, I will discuss how a retailer's purchase order influences their relationship with the supplier. Supplier factories are independent businesses, and their customers are retailers who want to buy their goods. For example, Foxconn produces more than 40% of world's electronics. While Apple is a major supplier at Foxconn, Foxconn also produces for companies like Sony and Intel. However, because Apple purchases goods at greater quantities, their purchase order supersedes their competitors, Sony and Intel. So, in other words, depending on the amount of goods you need from suppliers will help determine the degree of influence suppliers will have with the retailers. In this slide, we will discuss the impact audits have in factories. Alone, audits are seldom able to change workplace conditions, nor do they provide a guarantee. Auditors do not go into full detail, they take snapshots of a specific time and place, which obviously does not disclose everything that takes place in a factory. Supplier factories will do what is expected and inspected at the time audits are given. Ultimately, it is what is done with the information found in the place, whether it be by an auditor or anyone else, that affects change. Ethically made products are not always more expensive. Price elasticity varies by product and by its consumer base. I will use an example to explain this. Let's look at the iPhone. Apple products are made in sweatshops. Therefore, we can say that there are some ethical bounds that Apple crosses. The question we need to ask ourselves here is this: if a price premium were definitively established to ensure ethical products, meaning that the products will not be made in sweatshops, would consumers still purchase it? Personally, I believe if Apple increased the dollar amount on their products, many people would still purchase their products. So basically, companies do not have to purchase their goods from sweatshops because consumers will pay for their product. The final reason why sweatshops still persist today is because of misaligned incentives and unintegrated retail departments. This just means that all departments have their own agenda. Many years ago, companies established corporate social responsibility departments, allowing the departments to focus on different areas. If they do not cooperate with other departments that communicate with suppliers, conflicting messages may occur, producing misaligned incentives. For example, these are some of the questions suppliers receive from different departments. The purchasing department might ask, "Can you produce this by next week?" The design department might ask, "Can you change this now?" And corporate social responsibility might ask, "Can you cut overtime to legal limits?" It is crucial that all departments are on the same page and have similar goals and objectives to meet the code of conduct. If they are not integrated, the supplier might only listen to the department that issues with the purchase order. There are several issues with sweatshops' productivity. Number one, their working conditions are unethical and inhumane. Workers are forced to work unreasonable hours for extremely unfair wages. The work conditions are often very unsafe, and workers do not know how to properly use equipment because they were never taught. Second, workers are being forced to work time so that they can reach deadlines set by the company. If or when the company makes last-minute decisions or increases an order, the supplier will have the product on time by keeping workers working until the order is complete. Lastly, sweatshops violate two or more labor laws, and women and children tend to face physical, sexual, and verbal abuse from managers and supervisors when simply messing up an order. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of sweatshops altogether, but companies could command that suppliers construct better working conditions and fair wages, and failure to comply go to other suppliers. The government could also pass legislation laws to protect sweatshop workers from these conditions. We could also limit the amount of hours that these workers are working and ensure that they did not have to work overtime if it was not their choice. And lastly, we can pay workers the wages they deserve for the work that they're doing. Thank you all, and I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation.